This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rains on the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rains on the track when we unite.
Hey now, it's the Mike and JD Show, and we are definitely bringing our A game tonight. I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm joined as always by JD by God Oliva. How you doing, JD?
Not bad, man. I am. So we had rain today, right? And I was going to get gas this morning, and I took my turn too wide going to the gas station, and I bumped a work van in front of me.
Ooh.
Fortunately, there was no damage done. I'm like, oh, you want to trade insurance? And he was like, no, it's more trouble than it's worth. So I was pretty happy about that. And then it was also I wanted to buy a giant pop this morning before work because I was dragging ass. So I bought the giant pop, walked into my classroom, and proceeded to drop it on my classroom floor. So I spent the first period mopping my class. So the day started off fantastic.
What's pop?
That's how we refer to soda in the Midwest.
Oh, okay.
Mr. I'm from Missouri.
Yeah, I lived in Missouri for 4 years, but I was, I've been in California outside of all those 4 years for the most part. So I grew up saying soda, but it freaked me out when I moved to Missouri and people said pop.
Yeah, that's what we if you call it soda out here, people look at you funny, like, what? Soda? Kind of make fun of people who talk like that up here.
Yeah. It's so weird how different parts of the country calls different things. It's the weirdest thing. And so I never understood why anybody would choose pop over soda. So it was a pop can. So that's why they called it soda pop. And in the West Coast, we just stuck with soda. And then I think in the Midwest, it was called pop. And who fucking knows what they called it on the East Coast?
I think they call it soda too. I'm pretty sure it's just pop here in the. I know in the South, it's Coke. Anything is Coke. If you got a Sprite, if you ask for a Coke, they ask you what kind. If you want a Sprite, you have to refer to it as Coke. It's weird.
Yeah. So we were at the beach the other day and my wife was just getting super tired. She's like, oh my gosh, I need some Coke. And I was like, don't say that too loud because people might misconstrue exactly what kind of Coke you're talking about.
Especially on a beach.
They could think that we're about ready to head to a party.
Definitely the wrong kind of vibe.
Yeah, definitely, man. I've had a pretty good week. This is my first full week back to work, so that's been good. I've been kind of getting back into the swing of things. Traveling was tough, but I'm back in it now. I might get a little cranky. I might be a little grumpy today because I started back up on my diet. Yesterday. So when I was traveling, I had to wear my blues, right? My dress blues, and I've had these things for a long time. And they typically always fit. Them bad boys are a little snug flying. I had to fly in those things. And my belt and my pants were screaming for mercy during the trip. So at one point on my flight from Honolulu to Dallas, I actually unbuckled my buckle and unbuttoned my pants, kicked my shoes off, and just sat there like a schlub on the plane because my shit was way too tight. So I was like, honey, I got to do it. I got to get back on my diet. So I'm essentially starving myself right now. I just got done eating dinner, so hopefully that cheers me up.
I find the thing that works the best is counting your calories, right? More so than crash dieting. That seems to be the best way to manage your weight control is just and then you have to be accountable for every piece of crap thing you put in your body, and you feel guilty when you're like, ooh, do I really need that Snickers bar?
Yeah. Well, and I'm incorporating a lot more. So my knees are bad, my hips are bad. And but I still really like to run, so I'm reducing the amount of running that I'm doing to one time a week, and then I'm going to instead of running every 3-4 times a week, I'm going to run once a week. But during the week, I'm going to start incorporating burpees and squats and more of a HIIT routine incorporated into some of my weight training. And my weight training, I've completely eliminated heavy weights. I'm just doing sets of 15 on everything, sometimes sets of 25, 30. With lower weight, just trying to get more lean and still stay strong.
The high intensity interval training, the HIIT stuff, is actually really a great way to train in general because the human body doesn't need to run 10 to 12 miles. It's actually it's actually really hard on the body, especially when you get older, the joints and stuff like that. So to get in better shape and to help actually burn more fat, you need to spike your heart rate up and down at various points. So the high intensity interval training is really good. The if you mix it in with your weight training, that's great. Like with kettlebell training, stuff like that. That's actually an excellent way to really get the fat burning stuff going. Because like, you know, the way we used to do it back in the 90s and early 2000s is the wrong way. The long running, that's just like, it's too hard on the body. And actually you don't get your body into that fat burning state that you need it to be in. Like you need like sprints, like anything with an interval, like where you're up and down is it gets the heart moving in the right space to get to that fat burning zone. Because just having good cardio doesn't do anything if you're trying to watch your fat intake, like trying to watch trying to watch weight. Like you can have really great cardio and be a fat piece of shit. Hey, we're professional wrestlers. For years in pro wrestling. But I mean, you want to watch the fats, like, and you want to like really that's like stuff, the high intensity interval training, any kind of sprint interval workout. That's a great way to train. I'm sure this is why everyone comes here to listen to this show. To listen to a wrestling coach go on and on about ways that they can to get in better shape.
Yeah, and an Air Force guy who has to pass a fitness test once a year, and how I try to maintain my weight all throughout the year. I did my test a couple months ago, and brother let himself go, so it's time to tighten up a little bit as I head into the holiday season. Man, JD, so we got a ton to talk about. Should we eat shit right away?
Let's eat shit right away.
That's kind of what we do here. We typically we take big risks with some of the stories that are out there. We swing for the fences, and we typically eat shit. I'm going to eat shit, but there's going to be a little bit of a caveat here. Okay. I didn't report a single goddamn thing because I am not a reporter. I just talked about what was out there. So you feel free to attack me on this, but I stated this last week on Overtime that I am not a reporter. This is just kind of stuff that's out there. So we'll go ahead and get into it. So essentially on Overtime, and we we talked about this before Meltzer reported it and before Sean Ross Sapp and all these other guys, that WWE and CM Punk were in fact in talks at one point in time. And it was looking like he might be going there.
Yeah, man. We didn't hear in talk. The words that we heard were verbally agreed to terms.
Yes. Like they had a plan in place. They had a date in mind. Like it wasn't a done deal, clearly, because they still had some more hoops to go through. But some of the decision makers, not the top ones, obviously, and CM Punk were pretty much all on the same page at one point in time last week.
At least that's what we heard.
That's what we heard, yeah. And Dave Meltzer talked about it, that Punk was wanting to go back to WWE, that there must have been at some point some consideration that was the case. Because he talked about it in the Observer. Other sites had picked up on it too. We were, obviously enough people out, because we didn't talk to anybody from the Observer about this. We had they told us nothing about this. So we kind of heard similar stuff at the same time. And then we get into the weekend, and we're still getting more teases on WWE. WWE has been teasing CM Punk stuff for the last couple of weeks, specifically with Seth Rollins and some of the stuff he was saying. Corey Graves made a kind of an offhand remark, quoting an old CM Punk promo from Ring of Honor. And then we get to Monday.
Quoting a promo that was quoting a movie for 1995, but continue.
Yes. And then we get to Monday, and on Raw, Shinsuke Nakamura hits the GTS. And I'm like, okay, we're home, baby. This dude is going back to WWE. We're gonna have something interesting to talk about. Well, we're on the home stretch. And then we get up on Tuesday, and Sean Ross Sapp puts out a report that stating that WWE contacted him and said they are not going to be bringing in CM Punk. CM Punk's not coming in. Nick Hausman backed it up. Dave Meltzer backed it up. Everywhere's backing it up. So it looks like they were negotiating at one point in time. And at one point in time, it looked pretty promising. And then at some point, the whole thing just fell through. I have a theory on that, but I'm going to let you go first. The whole thing fell through. CM Punk is, in fact, not going to WWE. They essentially turned his ass down. So,
like, what happened is Sean Ross Sapp got a call from his sources at WWE, and Fightful, I guess you could say, broke the story. I think because Dave went, because you and I were just going to put this on our Patreon. right?
Yes.
Because our Patreon's like our buddies. So we were going to talk to our
Yeah.
patrons like, hey, this is what we're hearing. This is probably going to happen. And then the next morning, Dave with the Observer comes out and there's paragraphs about Punk coming back to WWE. Right. Because it had been the scuttlebutt. Like if we hear it, there's Dave definitely knows it if we've heard it. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure once it hit the Observer, you come, okay, it's time to put this one back. We got to put this genie back in the bottle because it ain't going to happen. I'm of the mind that was probably news to CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably news to the rest of the company too, because I don't care what, like the whole idea is like, well, that's talent just kind of doing their own thing and going into business for themselves. Yeah, because that happens all the time in World Wrestling Entertainment. Talent are known for going into business for themselves and not following the script.
Especially Shinsuke Nakamura on the road to a big event in Chicago. He certainly wouldn't be on his own doing a GTS, right?
Well,
like,
he's never
certainly
done
not going to do that. Yes,
he's never done.
It makes no sense for him to do that.
So, I think we're of the same mind of this, right? Something fell through.
I think they got all the way up and it was all agreed upon. They had it figured out. Money, I don't know about. I don't know about any of that stuff, but they all had it figured out. And Vince, who we'll talk about a little bit later, very likely put the kibosh on the whole thing. Said, no, not this guy. This guy.
We heard, I don't want to reveal who we heard this from, this different source who, I'll let this person reveal himself at some point, said the rumor was that Nick Khan said to Punk, I don't know about you. We love Adam and we're going to get, and we gave him a lot of money and he's not a draw. I'm not sure about, which I could absolutely hear a hardline negotiator like Nick Khan saying those words to a CM Punk. Because is the juice worth the Punk squeeze right now for them? After what we saw this week, I don't think so.
They're going to go from number 1 to number 1. Like what would be the point? Sell a couple extra tickets in Chicago. I honestly, I very much understand why they didn't re-sign Edge. I totally get it. The guy costs a lot of money. He's not bringing any money in. He might sell you a couple t-shirts. He might help you sell out Toronto, but that's it. And then, so the same thing for CM Punk. CM Punk is a bigger draw than Edge. CM Punk is a bigger ratings mover than Edge. I just don't think that you're going to get so much more money than you would have to spend to make a whole thing worth it. I just don't see it, especially considering the guy's history and the fact that they did fire him before and he got fired from AEW and he got suspended there twice. And the whole, it literally just never made any sense to me that the WWE would even think about bringing him back. I understand why they had the conversation. I think you should at least kick the tires on the guy, see what he's made of, but are you going to risk your locker room? Or are you going to, risk all of that? Because when you bring a guy like that in, he's going to be costing a lot of money. You're not going to give him a ton of power to where he's going to have leverage over the company, but you're still going to build a lot of your programs around him. He's going to be a big part of the show.
We talked about this last week. I said there's a lot of guys in the company who don't like him all that much. Cody Rhodes I went back and listened to Cody Rhodes' last promo from AEW. When I say last promo, his last AEW program, the "What do you want to talk about?" promo, which people remember that line, but they kind of forget that he brings up the pipe bomb and says that he did all the stuff that Punk talked about doing in that promo, which is true. And at that point, it's so weird to listen to Cody not be able to control a crowd. So much has changed in the last 2 years, right? Because remember, in early 2022, the AEW fan base had totally turned on Cody Rhodes, right? Yeah. Completely, totally turned on the guy. And then to hear him basically say, you guys are choosing this guy over me and you're fucking stupid, right? And look where we are now. Like, yeah, he was right. I mean, that guy went to the AEW and was whether you believe he was a cancer or a savior, he was a gigantic divider of that locker room. And we say this as fans of him. You and I both profess that we are big fans of his work, but I cannot tell you that AEW is in a better place because of him at this point.
In fact, I think one could argue that they're in a much worse place since because they peaked so much. And hey guys, if you're in the chat, do me a favor. I forgot to share the show tonight, so if you could do, I just shared it. So if you guys could tell your friends that you're watching us, and if you can give us a big thumbs up, if you can comment on the video, and make sure that you're a subscriber to the Voices of Wrestling Network, I'd really appreciate it. So I am a big believer that he did way more harm than good, and I understand that they did this tremendous first pay-per-view with All Out a couple years ago. Their pay-per-view numbers after that, their baseline was a lot higher with Punk than it was before he got there, right? Because right now they're kind of inching closer back to that original baseline of right around 100 to 120, 130,000. But with Punk, it was a bit higher, right? And so I think that All Out did like what, 220 something like that, like 250 something like that. So
it was like 220.
Yeah.
All in was about 200 too. Like their baseline is about 140 right now. Prior to Punk, it was about 100. Right, like they were averaging about 100,000. So I mean, they've retained more since bringing him on, right? And that is the only. We'll talk about this later. That is the only metric that AEW has grown over the past 2 years, right? I think that upsetting. I think that the buzz you get from CM Punk is leaned out by the baggage he carries, right? And when I say baggage, I'm not talking about his fans, which can be a bit something, but I mean, like Punk just can't stop being Punk. And if you're WWE, and it's funny, I want you to like really look back on where things were 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, we had the same situation with SmackDown. Remember? They went for a third hour SmackDown, put it on FS1, third hour SmackDown. I forget. They put it, I think the second hour SmackDown, they put it on FS1 against AEW, and they won. AEW won.
Yeah.
Right? At that stage, we were all like, oh my God, there's something really going on here. They talked about, I found some old tweets of mine, at the 2022 Royal Rumble, none of the last like 6 people in the ring were under 40. Right? We were talking about how this company is like, they haven't made any stars. There isn't anything happening there, blah, blah, blah. And in less than 2 years, the script is completely flipped.
Yeah.
And he's a big part of the reasons why on both sides.
Yeah, because if you look at his feud, and we'll stick with AEW. If you look at his feuds there, he had the quick Darby, right, where he beat Darby, and that was the end of that. They never really went back to it. They could have went back to it later, but obviously things.
He spent more time teaming with Darby after that match than feuding with him. They really feuded with him. Yeah, he just kind of called him out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he had the awesome, fantastic, one of my favorite feuds ever with MJF.
You're forgetting one. He had a mini feud with Eddie.
That's right. They
into Full Gear.
Yeah, but that was like a 2 to 3 week kind of like, hey, we want to get this. Yeah. So they built it up at the last minute typically, but they did. They booked a match, and then they had a hell of a match too.
They did.
And he beat Eddie, and then they go to MJF. He splits with MJF, and then he does the Moxley thing. He has Hangman. He beats up Hangman. Tanks Hangman's career to where Hangman has never been able to recover since then.
Correct.
And then he does the Moxley thing, and then Brawl Out happens, and he comes back, and then who's he feuding with? 43, 44-year-old Samoa Joe, right? I think they were going to eventually get to MJF. I think they did something with Starks. They're eventually going to get to the MJF thing, but they just never really got to it. So really, what did they end up gaining besides some early success and a little bit of notoriety in the beginning of his run there? Not much. Like they're not the better for it.
No, especially because of what happened behind the scenes. Like, talk about Brawl Out all you want, but I mean, like, there's like a legit division. Like, the Bucks and FTR were working together, and they just, it was what it was. They went from like, we work together, okay, it's fine, to like seriously disliking each other at various points, right? I mean, like there was a lot more. Like, remember when this is so funny, guys like Jim Cornette used to make fun of AEW for being like that. Oh, the happiest all friends wrestling, everybody's happy in their locker room. What a bunch of bullshit. And then there's problems, and they're cackling the whole way. Well, which is it, motherfucker? Which is better, when everybody hates each other or when people like each other? Like, I think when
everybody's a professional, right? And that's where we, like, you don't have to like everybody. Everybody has to be professionals, right? And that's where we went off, because one guy when he's reacting to people being unprofessional is to get physical, right? Versus handling things in a professional manner, which ended up tanking it. Since his suspension from the year before, well, like the original suspension, somebody's gonna do a study on this, and it'd be fascinating, like the decline in ticket sales and ratings since that original suspension. I know there's been ebbs and flows, and of course they had the big show in the UK, but domestically it's been terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been like year over year has been pretty awful for that company. So if you're WWE and you're taking a look at that, it's like, what the fuck? Why would we do that? We're hot right now. Mm-hmm. Now, if eventually they take a big dip and they need to take a risk, right, to get money going back up, to get these live events back up, maybe they take a flyer on them. But Joe in the chat, and I'm gonna get you guys in the chat here in a minute. Joe in the chat says Chicago was already sold out.
Yeah.
Both shows, Survivor Series and SmackDown, I believe they were already sold out. So that proves right there that WWE, they don't need CM Punk, and honestly, they don't need Edge, and they were smart to turn down Edge, and they're smart to turn down CM Punk.
I agree 100%. Like, that's the thing too, is it's like AEW really kind of. AEW had some news today. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Let's do it now. Fuck it. Did you see the news today that AEW is bringing in Mystico for Rampage next week?
Yeah, I had that for the end of the show, but let's talk about it now while we wait for our guest. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I got a point, because we're waiting on a guest. So he's going to wrestle Rocky Romero, which is perfect. Rocky is professional wrestling's forbidden door, like personified. Rocky goes everywhere. Rocky does whatever. The man is amazing, right?
He's a slut. Go ahead.
You say he's a slut. I say he's incredible because he's the only guy who can work everywhere. If Rocky showed up in the Royal Rumble in a couple months, people would go, "Oh yeah, of course it would be Rocky. Who else would be the first guy to do this? Why wouldn't it be Rocky Romero?" You know? So the fact that he's working Mystico is amazing. The fact that Mystico, not as Mystices, is going to be on the same card as Penta is nuts. Like, this is a complete and total shift in CMLL business. Like, this is like mind-blowing stuff, politically speaking. And to this day, Mystico, not fucking Sin Cara, is the biggest lucha star of his generation. And they're doing it at a Houston show, right? It's a Houston suburb, but you're talking about something that borders Mexico. So you're doing this to do local promotion. This is just such a good thing to do. And of course I put that out there, and I get a nameless guy who's like, "What? That's just not a lucha on the show. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else." Fuck that, man. I'm so tired of this attitude where everything has to be growing all the time. We have to grow. We have to grow. We have to grow. Right? What do we say on the show, Mike?
Well, we have to grow. But I gotta say, is what we say. Oh, fuck the casuals. But you and I got heat right now because you did not quote tweet that using the hashtag bad tweets. Because I think that
Mike, I couldn't.
Oh, okay. Because
I want you to go through my timeline and you'll see why.
Okay.
Never mind. But this is the thing, though. Is like for the last, we'll get into this later. For the last couple of years, it's always been you had guys with like these disingenuous takes, like Wade Keller, going, "Well, how do they get their 2nd million viewers? How do they get their 2nd million? Motherfucker, WWE struggles to get 2 million viewers." Yeah, and like the 4-year-old company is expected to just be able to just do this. Like, the idea that they should be able to be where WWE is right now is ridiculous. And so what have they done? Tony Khan has listened to these people, right? And he has decided, well, we need to get WWE fans liking our product. They saw what happened. You said this last week before anybody else. Yeah. They saw what happened with the Bloodline. And they said, well, God, we got to do that. We need to do more of what they're doing. So this past year has been nothing but you steering into being more WWE-like. And as the months by, they've gotten less and less and less from the ratings and less and less and less in ticket sales, right? To the point where there's lots of fans who were into AEW initially have rejected the product because it's becoming more 2010 TNA instead of 2006 TNA. Right?
Yeah, because 2006 was super innovative. It was cutting edge.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, they were in a studio, and they obviously, but it was a little bit different. But like, that's kind of what we want AEW to be. But instead, we're steering into, like you were saying, we're steering into essentially, yes, Danny, screw the casuals. We're steering into, hey, we're bringing back the Attitude Era. We're going to sketch comedy now. We're going to do more sketch comedy. We're going to get away from the awesome wrestling matches. We're still going to have some, but the awesome wrestling matches we're going to have are all going to be muttered with interference, nonstop interference, which was 2010 TNA, a lot of Attitude Era stuff. You can have some of that stuff. I watched Dynamite this week. I thought it was an entertaining show. I had to fast forward through the Roddy stuff because I'm sick of it.
Smart decision.
And then honestly, someone else who's jumping the shark for me already is fucking Tony Storm, because her black and white sketch I thought was terrible. I like what she's doing in her interviews, and I like what she's doing hitting people's shoes. But that sketch comedy stuff, it takes too long.
I agree with that.
And it's not very good, right? And I get that on the other stuff. I watch you because you guys were supposed to be the opposite of them. And so, and AEW absolutely has a higher expectation for it, because they advertised themselves on being the alternative, and now they're steering into what WWE was, which is WWE Light. They're steering into, Eric Bischoff running the company, or John Gabrurik. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. That's the problem right now, is when you try to chase, like Tony Khan's doing also, challenger brand. Fucking act like a challenger brand, man. Like, what is the one metric the AEW has grown? They've grown in the last 2 years in pay-per-views. Why? Because AEW puts on these fucking awesome pay-per-views with great wrestling. And that is what the AEW fan wants to see. Wrestling. What did WWE do the last 2 years? What have they done the last 2 years that's been smart? They built new fans.
Yeah. Yep.
Their teenage audience has grown. And I'm a high school teacher, man. I will tell you, I hear my kids all the time. It's more last year than this year, but I heard it a lot more last year doing bloodline stuff. I walk in the classroom, the kids are all doing this. Like, that was they were into the story. They have built another level of fan by reaching out to those people, right? AEW is trying to reach WWE fans, and WWE fans since 1987 have only been interested in WWE. You will not reach those fans. And professional wrestling history is littered with the bones of companies that tried to chase the World Wrestling Federation, and they have not tried to stand out and do their own thing. When AEW was successful and on the come up, it was because they were different. It was because the show was different. It was because we had things. We had Mox bleeding. We had all this crazy. We still do have that. But now you see so much a proliferation of people from the other side have come in. Right. Mm-hmm. There's guys there. People. I had one dude on my Twitter who I like this guy, but he's like, they need to focus on guys like MJF and Tony Storm. I'm like, motherfucker, they're all over the show. They're all over the show. It's like, well, they need vignette time. I'm like, how many more vignettes can we give these people? And then I realized you don't actually watch the show. You're just parroting what people say. And that's the problem, is you don't get honest to God criticism. You're getting people who just parrot things that Eric Bischoff says. And Eric Bischoff's a fucking moron. Why would you listen to Eric Bischoff? He torpedoed WCW when they were the most profitable wrestling company in the world. And in 1 year, he lost his job and took him down. Right. And then they brought him into TNA and he completely cut the legs off from underneath them too. But you're going to parrot this guy's opinions on wrestling. Like, they need to go away from everything they've been doing the last 2 years and get back to what works for them and what excites their fan base, and then find new fans to go from there by doing your thing. Pepsi doesn't try to make a drink that tastes like Coke. Right? They don't do that. They just work on Pepsi. Coke tried to change the recipe once to be like Pepsi. What happened? There's a big cash thing. Guys should look up the new Coke thing if you weren't around in the 80s. That's a big story.
New Coke completely shit the bed. You if you want to be an alternative, be an alternative. That doesn't mean that you don't, utilize some WWE ideas from now and then. Just be yourself, like, book to your strengths, and don't worry about what that casual audience is going to want, because that's what WWE has those guys on lock. You have this really big, a large audience that will pay a lot of money to watch you guys on pay-per-view. Now you got to just get back to getting them back to the shows, getting them watching your product again, and get hot again. And how you do that, I don't know, but I tell you how you don't do it. I don't think that you recycle 50-year-old WWE Hall of Famers and start feuds from 20 years ago on your television. I don't think that's how you do it. And honestly, the numbers last 2 weeks are proving me right, which we're going to talk about once we bring in our guests here. But
Joe,
before we bring on the
we get the guests, Joe, you got to. I dropped a lot of lines, so you got to be more specific in which line I dropped, and I got to move on from because I don't even know.
Yeah. Tell JD how he was brilliant. He wants to hear that.
I love hearing that stuff.
Let's go to the chat real quick. We got Nora Sparks. He said, "Dang, I thought this was an Impact Wrestling review." Hey, brother, brace for Impact this weekend. Yeah, brace for Impact this weekend. It's going to be on patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show. My guy Kozlov. I've been saying that Kozlov should come to Impact, and he is on the show now. So they got Kozlov. So we'll be talking about that guy. IO Productions, Patreon subscriber. What's up? Be your own wrestling brand and dance to your own beat. You're damn right, sir.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we got Danny in the house. Danny, I said, who gives a damn about the casuals when they don't give a damn about you? Absolutely.
Agreed.
And then Joe followed up with the line that he thought was brilliant, littered with bones of companies chasing WWE.
Oh, that's a good line. I should write that down. That was good.
You should, because we're actually going to talk about something like that on the Patreon. We're going to record it later tonight. We're going to drop it. We're going to drop it over the weekend, maybe on Monday. It depends on if a new fucking news story breaks out and we have to drop it early. But we're going to talk about TNA losing their Spike TV deal. And there was an article that was written at the time stating that there will never be another number 2 again. Like this might have been one of their last opportunities. Not from Dave Meltzer, somebody from Grantland. It was the old Ringer website, Grantland. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, we got Lucha Doncic, #1 NC Ho in the building. He is definitely a North Carolina Ho. He's also a Patreon subscriber, so we love him. But JD, let's go ahead and get to our guest.
Let's do it.
He is the guy that brought us into the wrestling podcasting space. We used to work for him over at Fight Game Media Network. He is the co-host of my favorite version of Wrestling Observer Radio. Hope that doesn't give him any heat. He is Garrett Gonzales, man. How you doing, Garrett?
What's up, guys? I was not surprised to see JD already on fire when I was in the green room there.
I was in a really good mood, and then we just started talking about this stuff, and I just got all feeling-y. I don't know.
You're a man of passion.
I'm Italian.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, guys, reminder: if you're in the chat, please take a couple of seconds and hit that thumbs up on the YouTube show. Let's tell our bosses of Voices of Wrestling Network that you like us.
Does that really work? Is that something that helps?
You know, so because of you, Garrett, I have been watching Larry Krueger.
Yeah.
I did not know that he had a YouTube show, but I watched him on your 49er review, Go Niners. And now I'm watching his 49er review, and he hits that algorithm pretty well. He actively talks people into hitting that like button and commenting on his videos, and he does it throughout his live feed. And I was like, you know what we need to do? We need to do more of that. I think it's important to remind people to do that, because videos that are liked and videos that are commented on or being actively engaged typically get in that algorithm and get into your feed a lot faster. That's what I'm learning over time as I start to do more of the YouTube business. You know what I mean? Makes
a lot of sense.
Yeah. But Garrett, we've been talking about bringing you on for a while. We're really excited to have you. And since we have you on, I think I've heard a little bit of your story before. I know you're one of the co-founders of Nextdoor, and you got a really cool history. But what I'm interested in is, how does somebody like a rando dude like you that's not connected to the wrestling business become friends with Dave Meltzer out of nowhere? Like how does that even happen? And then I got more questions about Dave since I got you
on. The way that it happens is not to say that I necessarily made it happen. There's a lot of flukes involved in it happening, but obviously becoming a fan is kind of the thing. And I have been reading him since 1991, but I didn't read The Observer I didn't subscribe to The Observer until 99, I believe. How I read him was through The National, which was the daily sports newspaper that he was writing for. And my dad would get it, and he'd come home from work, and I'd be home from school, and he'd throw it at me. And one day I read it, and I was like, wow, who's this guy writing about wrestling? And the reason why I know it's 1991 is because of the WrestleMania 7 situation, where they had to pull out of the LA Coliseum, which they wanted to say was because they were worried about the health of one Sergeant Slaughter, but really it was because they just didn't sell any tickets to that show. And so when I sort of realized that, and I was reading this stuff going like, wow, like this is very interesting information. There's a different side to wrestling than I realized existed. And then from there, I was just so interested in that side. So fast forward to, gosh, we're talking 1999, 2000 when I did start subscribing, and I realized that he was from where I was from. I told my ex-wife, the mother of my two sons, at the time, this was around 2003, 2004. I said, you know what? At some point, I'm going to meet this guy. And because of this wrestling thing, I'm sure there will be, not to say that we're going to be friends or anything, but I'm sure it'll be like an interesting conversation. I don't imagine there's a lot of people like me who he meets on a daily basis. So fast forward 2004, actually get invited to his house, but not by him.
Yeah.
So Dave talks about going back. He's got all these old crazy friends who would come over and watch wrestling and watch UFC. And my best friend was working at the Gold's Gym in Campbell, which is where Dave went to go work out. And so he would see Dave pretty much every day, and he would say hi and stuff. And he got to be friends with one of Dave's friends. His name was Bobby. Interestingly, I've never met Bobby since I've been friends with Dave, so I don't know what happened there.
But he's such an important part of your history. That's
so he and my best friend were getting kind of buddy about wrestling and stuff, and so he's like, "Hey, if you want to watch this Chuck Liddell fight at Dave's house, like, let's go. You're invited." So he tells me, he's like, "Hey, we got to go watch Chuck Liddell at Dave's," and he's not even a UFC fan. And so that was the same night that the Rundown, the Rock movie, The Rundown, had come out, and my ex-wife and I had like date night, so we had to go see The Rundown. And I was a little bit like bummed out, but at the same time, I was like, you know what? We're gonna cross paths. Like I'm sure I'll meet him at some point. And a few years later, we met at what is called Pat's Run, which is the run at Leland High School in honor of Pat Tillman. That's where I actually first physically met him. And I on Wrestling Observer Radio, we shared this story, and I have the photo, and I threw it out there and shared it on Twitter long time ago. And just through the F4W community, through going to Las Vegas, there was one moment, I think it was whenever Randy Savage passed away that year. It was like shortly thereafter, we had one of these F4W conventions in Las Vegas. And so we're in this like little ballroom. Ed in San Antonio had set it up, and he's got merch and all this stuff. And so I'm sitting at one of the tables, and I see Dave, and Dave comes in, and he starts like doing the thing where he just like eyeballs the entire room. He's like, who do I know? Who do I know? Who do I know? And he locks eyes with me because we'd met before, and I talked to him a few different times. And he just comes and sits by me. And he sits by me for like 2.5 hours, and we just talk. And like people are randomly coming up and saying hi to him and stuff, but that was kind of the connection. And then a couple years later, I had just moved, and I just reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, I'm in the process of moving. Cancel my cable. Do you mind if I come over and watch whatever the WWE pay-per-view was at that point?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem. Come over." And he invites me. I go to his house. Who opens the door to let me in to Dave Meltzer's house? None other than my co-host on the Fight Game podcast, John LaRocca. John LaRocca had been going to Dave's house maybe like 2 months prior. Dave had invited him over to watch these pay-per-views. So then that's when John and I got close. That's when Dave and I got close. And it was really when Brian Alvarez, I think he had his second kid, he was like, "Hey, I know you and Dave are friends, and I know you do podcasting. Can you help me? Because I just had a new child, and I cannot do the show as many times as Dave wants to do it." And like, I was like, yes. Before, like, I didn't know equipment. I had nothing. I was just like, yep, I'll do it. And then I had to sort of figure out everything else. And like, if you go back those like first 5 shows that I recorded with him, they're terrible and they sound bad because I didn't have equipment and I was trying to do stuff on the fly. And then Brian had to go like, "Okay, hold on, let me send you stuff and here's how you do it," blah, blah, blah. So, and then I started just recording with him, and we would do it in person because I felt like that was the best way to do it. And sort of from that moment on, like, we were already friends, but I think we got closer because of that moment. And then during the pandemic, when we couldn't meet together anymore and we're still doing these shows, I think it just created a different sort of closeness. Obviously, the pandemic was hard for people, and if you were kind of locked up in your house, like, you know, the outlet you had was maybe the person you would call on the phone, and that's kind of what Dave's phone was doing this podcast with me. And so I think we really connected throughout the pandemic, and it you know, made us closer. But really, you know, we were friends, but the podcast and doing the podcast and me kind of bringing a different element to it, because him and Brian, you know, they are like a lot of people who do this stuff, like they do it because of Wrestling Observer Radio. You can even go back. I know Mike probably has some old IATA shows on download somewhere, but like, that's kind of why we all started. It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. I love listening to these guys. And so Brian and Dave are kind of they're not the first people who ever did it, but they've been doing it for so long. You know, people look at them as like, that's, you know, those were the guys that I listened to growing up in this thing, and my commutes, like, it was all Brian and Dave. So like, I had to bring like a slightly different element to the show, because I couldn't do what Brian does any better than Brian does it, because he's just the king at that stuff. So I think just bringing a slightly different element to that show makes Dave think a little bit differently, and I think he really likes that part of it. So like, he's like, at some point I thought, okay, Brian's back, second kid, he's got it, they're good, and I wasn't gonna have to do it anymore. And Dave's like, nope, we want to keep Friday, let's keep doing it. And we've just been doing it ever since, and it's fun for me, but it's a lot of work. I got to read that Observer like within like 2 hours. I speed read the Observer just so I have every little bit of detail. But it's a blast. I figured out how to do it, and you know, hopefully people like it. There's no way that I could actually be better than Brian at his own show, but that's why I like to bring a little different side of things, because it has to be a little bit unique. So
Garrett, I think it's a different show. Go ahead, JD.
So Garrett, what you're telling me is you can't beat Brian at what he does, so you're going to be something different than what Brian is.
Yeah.
What a crazy concept.
Yeah, it seems like that's what we've been talking about all night.
Yeah. And I kind of heard the tail end of that conversation.
It was a good one.
And you know, it's what we've been saying right now. There are people out there. CM Punk was one of them, who you kind of had to at least try, because he was a big enough star. He had been gone for so long, and there was an opportunity to bring fans back. And I think they showed that. Those first shows, they showed he had a fan base that was going to watch them, that wasn't currently watching them. And I think the lesson is not everybody's CM Punk, right? There's one. And maybe I can't even think of another person. I was telling, I forgot who I was telling, but I said that, you know, because Matt Riddle is out there. And now Matt Riddle brings a whole different element of stuff as to why maybe you don't want to bring him on. But if we take away that stuff, just as a wrestler, would you want to bring in Matt Riddle, or would you just want to push the hell out of Ricky Starks? To me, sky's the limit maybe with Ricky Starks, and Matt Riddle's always going to sort of be Matt Riddle. So I think that mentality is really interesting, but I also think it's got to be tempting as hell for Tony Khan to just be like, I can bring over anybody. I have the money to bring over, you know, just about anybody. It's tempting to bring over an Edge, especially if you're a fan of Edge's, if you know him a little bit. Edge is a smart guy. He's probably a very charming dude. He's probably his own best salesperson, you know, for himself as Edge. So I understand, you know, why it's so tempting to bring these guys over. And I'm glad that, you know, I wouldn't have to make those kind of decisions, because, you know, that wrestling company would sort of look a lot like my favorite wrestlers probably. And that might not be best for business either, but there is this sort of history of the business, and, you know, I get to talk about it with Meltzer. So I'm it's constantly in my head about exactly what JD said, which is, you know, you can't out WWE. There's just no way.
Nor should you. I think that's the lesson, is like, you don't want to, because you can't beat them doing what they do. No one has. Like when WCW was at their best is when they were really trying to do their own thing, right? And when they focused on what they could be different. And that was when it was, and I think that's when AEW was at its best too. Is I remember Garrett, we left the All Out 2021 show feeling like, oh man, something big might have just happened here. And it probably did. But like, and I just talked to Mike before when the show started, like 2022 WWE, early 2022, they were talking about how terrible the morale was in the locker room, how nobody was under 40 in the Rumble. And in just a short amount of time, things can swing back in the other direction if you right the ship. It's not overnight, but 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 months fly by when you're not even realizing it. So, and the point I was making is I think that bringing in Sin Cara, Mystico is a good move because you're not going to use them a ton. It's like when you bring Mil Mascaras in, right? You're doing a show in the Texas border town, right? Get some people in the crowd, get something that AEW specific fans will care about. It's something cool. What do they like? What do AEW fans like more than anything? They like matches, right? And you put it on Rampage. No one's watching Rampage anyway, and it's a cool moment. So I tell you what, I'm more interested in Rampage now than I was 20 minutes before finding that out.
Well, just let me follow up with what JD said, and then you can go, Mike. The thing about the Mystico situation is he has never been on AEW television before.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique in that because of their relationship with AAA, like people probably thought, oh, maybe we won't ever see him in AEW. I sort of see it as an indie promoter would see it, in that guy's available. We bring him over. We pay him whatever his fee is. We don't have to sign him to a contract. We can't sign everybody. And if he's just going to come back sort of on a per date deal, great. But if he does perform, and if he does bring in new viewers, and that's kind of the experiment, right? You're doing this experiment with your television show. And if he does do better than the guys that you have, then maybe you do sign him. But the problem is that you already have done that with like 7 guys, and you are not able to then cut those guys. Like, I'm sure in Tony Khan's mind, he has a vision for Gravity in 3 years. Gravity is going to be this, whatever. He has this vision of what Vikingo is going to be in a couple of years. But we've already established that Vikingo at one point was a draw for that one-time special draw, and then we saw him on Rampage like a bunch of times, and then he lost. He wasn't that anymore.
In a battle royal, right? They had him in like a tag team battle royal at one point, one of their dozen battle royals that they've had this year. Yeah, so if they're going to bring in Mystico, they got to treat him like he's special, right? And
an attraction.
And treat him like an attraction. I think it's a smart thing to do. And back to what Garrett was saying, it's like, hey, do you bring in an Adam Copeland, or do you push Swerve? I think everybody knows the answer that I have, right? not that what Copeland's been doing on television isn't good. It is good, but it's wins above replacement, right? It's like, can you get to the same place that you're at right now with a cheaper prospect, right, that might have a bigger future? I think that you can, and I think they're finding that out right now. And you guys know me, I always relate everything back to sports. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're going to find out at the box office. You'll find out at ratings, and you ultimately find out at pay-per-views. And that's going to get us to one of the topics we want to talk to you about, Garrett, because I think Garrett has good insight onto on society and culture and things like that. He's really got his finger on the pulse of what's really going on. Not just in sports, but in like community and things like that. And MJF and Juice this week got themselves into a little bit of controversy, Juice Robinson. So MJF's promo about the anti-Semitism he faced as a kid and being having rolls of quarters thrown at him and things like that, essentially is a hate crime, right? I mean, that's not really something to play with. Well, they brought that up in an angle this week with Juice Robinson, where Juice had a roll of quarters with the name Friedman, not MJF. He went Friedman on there to basically spell out that last name, so that way we know that this guy is Jewish. So they were leaning into an anti-Semitism angle. There's no two ways about it. And they even spoke about it on commentary. And they took a lot of heat for it, and probably rightfully so, right? They took a lot of heat for it online. MJF has since come out saying, guys, it's all fake. This is just my story, which now if it was already dead at that point, it's probably even more dead now, because now nobody cares anymore. So what do you think about it, Garrett?
I think this is like the hardest. Now, when we talk about pro wrestling, it's usually pretty easy, right? got some matches. You can complain about booking. You complain about stars. We're all experts on ratings and all what that means. This is so different. And I have been thinking about this since you asked me to come on here and going like, okay, like we all have to be thoughtful when we're talking about this for one.
Yes.
This is not a necessarily a like a joke kind of angle or anything. This is very serious. And I have been pretty vocal going back to the NXT 2.0 era. For one, it was terrible. So I was trying to find a way to not watch that show anyways. But they had stereotyped some Asian characters pretty hard, like almost to the point of where I was like, you know, they used to do this in wrestling a lot when I was a kid. And now as an adult, I'm seeing it again. And I have a choice now. Like, I'm not this kid who's like, I can't wait to watch wrestling every weekend. Like, I mean, I still enjoy it, but I have a choice to turn the television off. And so I stopped watching NXT for, I don't know, a long while, 5 or 6 months. And I'm back watching it now. Sometimes I may watch the clipped version, but there was a reason why I stopped watching, and it was because of these overly stereotypical Asian characters. And so I relate back to that moment, and I cannot empathize completely with someone who is Jewish in this situation. But I can sort of look back on that and go, okay, like that turned me off. Now, I think the main reason why it turned me off was just because of how poor it was and how bad it was. Now, in this scenario, it's a little bit different. In MJF is the protagonist or the hero or whatever you want to call it. I have to be careful with those terms around JD because you know he's gonna.
You're gonna get some. Yeah. You're gonna get some literary terms at some point in this conversation. Trust me.
He'll go Mr. Oliva on you.
So this is. You know, this is step one, or maybe when he started to bring the story up again, maybe that was step one, but we kind of knew that wasn't the last time he was going to bring it up.
Yeah.
So it's still very early, and it looks like the idea is that MJF, this is like a baby. This is the vehicle to fully turn MJF babyface, and he is fighting against anti-Semitism. The question that I have is, why would Juice Robinson want to be involved in this? Because it is wrestling, it is fake, we understand that he is playing a character, but he is synonymous with Juice Robinson. I don't even remember what his real name is. Like, that is who he is. And so I thought that was interesting that he was okay with this, especially Mike, you mentioned doing the whole piece about his full last name. He didn't just call him MJF, he called him his full last name. And so that was an interesting part of it. And I think where I finally where my final thoughts went was when I watched it, I was very uncomfortable. And I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable for myself because, again, I can't fully empathize being Jewish. I was uncomfortable because I remembered what people said when he first brought that line up, and we all at some point thought, is Adam Cole going to hit this dude with quarters? Because that's really terrible if he does. That's a terrible way for a heel turn in 2023. And so that's kind of where I sat with was I took what they said, and that kind of helped create what I thought about this thing. Now, you bring up the situation going on in the world. And again, being unable to fully empathize. Now, we can all sympathize with terrorism and all of the deaths and such. The timing is really awful. Yeah. And kind of what I hold accountable here is this Tuesday Night War, which is created, which just kind of went haywire. And I hearken back to some of the worst decision-making that Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff made was during the wrestling war when they were just simply trying to one-up each other. And I really wonder if we didn't have this head-to-head battle, would they have pulled the trigger on this angle? Because this angle, it feels like, was set up specifically to kind of win the conversation of the night of the Tuesday Night War. And I wish that there was some sort of hesitation to do that, especially with the news of of what's going on in the world. But because of the war, the wrestling war historically, sometimes you just throw judgment out the window. Like the thing that I thought about immediately was Austin and Pillman, the gun angle. Like that was completely a wrestling war thing. WCW keeps kicking our butt. How do we kind of get the zeitgeist? How do we get it back? How are we the show that's talked about every night to beat this NWO thing? And so I wish that somebody would have told Tony Khan to not do this, especially at this time. But this guy's in a wrestling war, and I don't know for sure, but I just wonder if that's the reason ultimately that won out. But then Mike, you mentioned, and I'll end, and you guys can chat. MJF came out on Twitter and was basically like, here's why I'm doing this. This is what I really feel. I'm not going to hide behind this. And a lot of people are saying, well, why isn't Tony Khan getting ahead of the bad publicity? Now, I don't really see a lot of the bad publicity. I think TMZ had a story. Awful Announcing has been covering it, and they've actually been really fair pieces, I thought, for not a wrestling site. But,
yeah, I read his story, and I thought it was pretty good, the Awful Announcing one.
So maybe Tony feels like, well, it's not really, I'm not getting hit from all the sides that maybe I would consider it to be something in bad taste. And plus Max is out there. It's Max's thing. And maybe that's the thought behind why they're doing it this way. I don't know, but ultimately I wish that they wouldn't have done it. But I can't then also say, well, because I'm not Jewish, I'm a lot of friends and folks who are close to that community, they have completely different thoughts on it too. Some are like, it's fine. And others are like, this is the worst thing possible. So, I'm kind of leaning towards them and trying to learn more about, what they think. But ultimately I was pretty uncomfortable. And I thought maybe not only did I not really want to see it, I also just thought it was such bad timing and that he could have at least pushed it a little while.
It's funny you talk about timing, because last week MJF cut what I think we can all agree is the worst promo of his career. Like, he was struggling to get an audience reaction. The tofu thing with Jay White isn't working, and his work, especially his babyface work, has been subpar for the last little bit. And Suit Williams for this website wrote a dissertation, a really good piece on what's wrong with the MJF character that I know for a fact that Maxwell Jacob Friedman, the person, read. And I think he was super motivated to go out and cut a hell of a babyface promo and prove people wrong, so to say. And to be frank, in a vacuum, I think his best babyface promo he's cut, maybe his best promo he's ever cut.
It was amazing.
Frankly,
It was great.
Fantastic. This is clearly his idea. I saw a lot of people getting worked up. I saw someone like, how could they do this to Max? And it's like, come on, dude. Like, this is a work, man. Like, who do you think is in control of all this stuff? The timing isn't great, but I think that Max Friedman, the person, saw this as a chance to do something. And he's steering like, look, wrestling has done a bad job addressing this stuff in the past. I'm not going to do that. And I think in his heart of hearts, he truly believes that he has a different take on this. And, we've had, Garrett, you and I have had discussions about what heels should and shouldn't do. And I tend to always lean in the favor of the creative, right? Because I think that sometimes art should be uncomfortable, right? Sometimes, like Joe Lanza on our network said that sometimes you're watching Max go through therapy when he's cutting promos, and it's 100% accurate.
Yep.
But I think that's a lot of creatives. Like, I look back, my favorite writer, Stephen King, right? I reread The Shining and I read Dr. Sleep, and those books are about alcoholism. The Shining is a book about an alcoholic who has no control and his only way out is death. And Dr. Sleep is about an alcoholic in recovery, and there's sequel stories, right? And that's Stephen King working through his demons, right? And I think that's what a lot of the great creators do. And I think for MJF, that is a life-defining moment. And he definitely is working through, I think a lot of what you see with this guy is legit, right? I think a lot of the way he talks about how he feels is real, and he is working through fiction to fix himself, which again, that is what every writer who's any good does. Now, the argument is pro wrestling the vehicle to do that? I don't have the answer to that question. That is your mileage may vary as a viewer kind of thing, right? Because there is no answer. But I'm of the mind that I would rather lean in the creator. If you have an idea, and you are sold on it, I'll say okay, right? Because for every Shining and Dr. Sleep, you get the Langoliers sometimes, or the Tommy Knockers. Those are shitty Stephen King books for you guys who don't know that. So I will support him in his effort. And I'll say, all right, I'm going to support him in his effort. And if you make people uncomfortable with art sometimes, I think that's a good thing. But I reserve the right to say, boy, did you strike out here?
Yeah. Because ultimately the audience is going to determine whether or not it worked, right? And sometimes we typically as podcasters and as kind of like wrestling reviewers will say, oh, well, that's just a heel trying to get heat, so then you're mad at him, so it worked. Well, not always, right? Sometimes you're so mad that you don't want to watch the show anymore, like Garrett just talked about, right? And I think he could be entering into into that territory a little bit with this angle. I don't know that for a fact. I think that we'll find out eventually. I would say yes, Max. You want to do this angle? It's an anti-Semitism angle in 2023. Maybe not the best idea to do it, especially in a wrestling platform. We're not a movie, we're not a TV show, although we are scripted entertainment. But I don't think our audience is more nuanced enough to do that. And in fact, you saw the backlash online whenever he did it. And also, if Chavo Guerrero Sr. today came to me and said he wanted to do an angle that he used to do with Roddy Piper in LA back in 1978, I'd tell him probably no. Or if he wanted to do that same angle with Terry Funk that he did in 1978, I would tell him no, that's probably not going to work today, right? Or I was there live for a Brock Lesnar promo on Eddie Guerrero, and it was one of the more racist promos I've ever seen in Fresno. It got a ton of heat there in Fresno because Fresno is a very Hispanic community. I would tell them today probably not. We're in a different world. You gotta get with the times. Now it could work, and I could be completely wrong. I just don't think it's going to work. I didn't think Juice executed very well, and I don't know why Juice would be in the promo anyway. He's the heat's with Jay
because Juice Robinson has hit people with rolls of quarters for a long time. That's why Max steered into that, because he could always lean back at it. Yeah, but Max,
he didn't write anybody's names on it.
But this is they're working on this together though.
I know,
Max can always go, oh, Juice has done this before.
Yeah,
this is part of his character.
Okay, but can we go back to why Juice wants to put himself?
That's on Juice. Well, I have no
idea. I got a good reason for you, Garrett. Okay. And it's Juice doesn't have social media.
Oh,
he doesn't have social media. He's there doing a job. He gets paid well. He didn't give a fuck.
His wife has a lot of social media though.
His wife does, and it is pretty commonly known that that they're married. But he himself, he doesn't really pay attention to the criticism because he doesn't have the social media. He does not care. And they asked him to do something, and he did it.
And he also wrestles for the most part. His most success is in Japan, and there may be different thinking and thought process there. So what's the reason why I mentioned the Juice thing, and I'm going to take this into like a pop culture reference that I will pop a couple people, but that's it. But in Beverly Hills 90210, there was a character.
Of course,
I knew this was coming eventually.
There was a character,
Andrea.
So Donna Martin, obviously Aaron Spelling's daughter. She is in an abusive relationship. And the guy who plays the abuser is Jamie Walters. He is also a singer. He had a couple pop songs out there. With the Heights.
How do you talk to an angel? I remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's all I got.
So he pushes her down the stairs, eventually goes and gets help. And they kind of bring him back in as like he's so sorry and got help and he's a good person. And his acting career was essentially over. He became a fireman and did good things with his life, but he said that character, even though it wasn't real, he got so much heat in the real world for portraying this character that it kind of ended his acting career. And so I don't think that's going to happen with Juice. I think, wrestling is much different. I think the fans are much different as well. And obviously this is not Beverly Hills 90210, which is doing 20 million, a Wednesday night. But it is an interesting thing for a character. Now, maybe it's a way for him to be in the main event angle. Like maybe that's kind of the positive to it. But that was the thing that I thought was like, I just don't understand why he would want to be this poor human in this role. I get why Max would want to be, because, look, we can go back only last year. Kanye West said something that was really offensive and anti-Semitic. Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, he did the same thing. He was sharing videos on Instagram that were anti-Semitic. So that part of it is still very much a big deal in the world. So I understand, and kind of back to, what JD was saying, why Max would want to do this. Because the anti-Semitism is out there, and it's constantly out there. And so I very much understand that part of it. Now, can they tell this story in the right way in professional wrestling? I think that's a different question.
Yeah, and I think that pro wrestling has done a poor job in the past of telling these types of stories. Now, Max is a next level performer than most people. Juice is a good performer, but Max is next level. Maybe they can pull it off. I get the feeling they're going to pull the plug on the whole deal, though. That's just my prediction.
You
think they're going to go?
No,
with it?
he's doing anti-bullying campaigns based on this. Like, Max has a lot invested in this story. I don't think it's going anywhere. It might get wrapped up pretty quick, but I don't think it's going anywhere.
Okay.
In the case of Jamie Walters' career, I think the big problem with him is he wasn't very good.
Well, he's a one note guy, but he was also kind of a heartthrobby guy before that turn in his character, and then he wasn't a heartthrobby guy anymore. He was very hated very quickly.
Well, because there are actors that have played like serial killers, rapists, Nazis, like Edward Norton. Was a Nazi in American History X that turned babyface in the same movie. His career turned out fine. You know what I mean? So
Jack Nicholson has done nothing but play sociopaths his entire career.
I had an interesting example, and I'm very interested because JD's a movie guy, obviously, and Mike, you know your stuff. I specifically decided that I was not going to watch Oppenheimer. And I knew that it was going to be a really good movie, and I knew that I would probably enjoy it. But I couldn't go in there thinking I'm going to watch a movie where the end goal is to kill Japanese people. I am Japanese American.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people probably think, it reminds me of too many things that I had to learn in school, right? It just reminds me of this thing that exists. Every time they talked about internment camps, I had family who was in internment camps. I have, my mom was very bullied in school because she was Japanese American. So I decided I'm just not going to watch this movie. And for people who want to watch it, more power to you. I don't care. It's just personally for me, I don't want to deal with it. But in the movie, I knew what it was about. I saw the trailers and I could make that choice. Somebody watching AEW on Tuesday night because of this hullabaloo about the Tuesday Night War, they were not able to have that choice when it started. So that is that is the difference, because people have talked to me about the same thing. Why is movies and wrestling a different example? You didn't see that coming. They did not preview AEW Dynamite that you were going to see this angle. So it is a little bit different.
Yeah, but you knew Oppenheimer was coming out, right? Like, I mean, like you heard about the movie.
So, yeah, but he's making the choice not to watch it. But when you're watching Dynamite, you don't know the anti-Semitism's coming.
No, but like that's the hint that it's coming, right? It's just because really we got the trailer. This angle is the trailer for what comes. So you can make the choice not to watch the match. Right?
You can make the choice that when MJF shows up, you can just fast forward or you can turn it off. But
it turns out
if I was running the company, my fear would be, did that angle make more fans than would churn? And I don't know what the answer is. We don't have any data on that yet, obviously. Yeah. But that would be the fear, right? Is that you turned off people who were fans and they may shut the show off for a few weeks. And I don't know if you will then make that up by fans that you may have made who are like, oh, this thing is interesting. But I could be wrong. There might be people who watch that show and were like, I'm very interested in where they go with this. And they may tune in. from here.
They
on
may
out.
most of the outrage has been through Twitter, and Twitter is not real life. It really isn't. I can tell you, Mike's opinion is don't do it. Don't go there. I don't think that you're skilled enough to pull that off. Save it for movies, right? Let movies and TV shows handle it. Pro wrestling can be sports entertainment. I don't think they need to go in that direction. I think it turns off more people than it's going to turn on. But I could be dead wrong. Maybe it generates heat and they sell some tickets off of this. But guys, we are up against the clock here, so I want to just get real quick. I want to get Garrett's and JD's thoughts on the NXT versus AEW war of Tuesday, and then we're going to do bad tweets. Okay, so so Garrett, what are your thoughts on AEW getting their asses handed to them by NXT?
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of what I'm going to talk to John LaRocca about on the Fight Game podcast, which is I thought for all the hullabaloo, the second time I used that word, and I don't think I've ever used that word in my life. I thought both
1930s.
Both companies put a very good foot forward, and I thought both shows were good if you like those shows. But I don't think that an NXT fan who only watches WWE turn the channel or whatever, however you do it these days, and said, you know what, this AEW, I like it. And likewise, I don't think hardcore AEW fans who don't like anything WWE related flipped over to see, John Cena pandering to the NXT crowd and were like, you know what, I need to watch more of this. It was a race for a rating that it's meaningful for 1 week, and I don't think that you built any fans at all. I don't think either show built fans based on what they did. So, I mean, I think we're just back to zero come next week, and everything's going to be the same.
Oh, 100%. I completely forgot this happened last year, right? Literally had zero memory that this happened last year. And like WWE finally said, let's just really try to beat them for once. Like, let's actually just like put effort into trying to beat them.
The problem is that they did get beat last year, and I'm sure they circled this date and were like, we're not getting beat this time, not on our own night. There's no way. And they went out and pulled out all the stops.
Well, and here's what's crazy about it is like for all talk of like NXT crushed AEW, AEW had the exact same 18 to 49 rating they had last year.
Yeah.
All the growth was in NXT because they got their fans. They finally motivated their fans to watch. And NXT's ratings have grown over the year, right? They've done a good job building NXT.
Thanks to the actor strike, you were able to get John Cena on NXT. Who knew?
Yeah. And my thoughts
getting
on it,
a lot more too, based on how things broke down this week.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So hey, we're gonna go to bad tweets. Garrett, stick around. You've never been a part of bad tweets before.
I'm excited.
Because it's a pretty new thing.
I'm gonna get bombarded with these.
Yeah, this nifty share screen here. Oh, okay. So first bad tweet is coming from. He just tweeted this. Oh no!
He deleted it.
Bitch. He deleted it.
You gotta You gotta screenshot these things, Mike.
You know what? Joe told me to screenshot it and put it into Google Slides, but I was just like, the Google Slides, it doesn't look that great. I'm just gonna go to Twitter. This coward, his name is a Ringspan. What an asshole! All right,
ruining our gimmick, man.
Yeah, ruin the gimmick. Ruin the gimmick. Okay, here's D_Robbins 202. Hey, Dave Meltzer. Let's be honest. Tony went up against NXT because he thought he would be able to beat them in the ratings easily. If he really wanted to make a statement, he would have ran Dynamite against Raw or SmackDown. You can prove me wrong if you want. That is a factually inaccurate statement because I don't think Tony Khan had a whole lot of choice in the night that they were being pushed to.
Not at all. Not at all.
I love these people that have such a poor understanding of how the television business works that they think a dude who owns a show can tell the people who own the network, hey man, this is when I'm gonna run my show. Like
Astros, you guys are moving to Thursday because I have to run like a different what?
Yeah, I don't want to look like a pussy, so I'm gonna go Monday night. So you guys have to figure something out. Yeah,
that's funny.
This one comes from a Cinnamon Girl. Dynamite is boring now. Just a load of ex-WWE talent. I like watching the future wrestle. She says that while the Undertaker was chokeslamming Braun Breaker in the main event of NXT.
That was the worst part of both shows. I hated that.
Yeah, that's ironic. And now I wonder if because we don't know Jesse Vasquez from
Love Jesse.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He
Yeah.
clipped this for us. I don't think she's entirely wrong though in this. Like what we talked about before. Like I think there's some truth to this.
I think the criticism is valid, but this was in the context of WWE versus AEW, and I just thought that it was kind of funny to say that on a night where they have both shows were really loaded with Attitude Era stars, right? And especially in their main event scene, they were loaded with like 50-year-old dudes.
Yeah, they had it was like Raw reunion against Raw reunion.
Yeah,
basically, and that's why AEW is in the fucking issue that it's having right now. This is a good tweet. Hold on, we're gonna save that one for later. And this is my bad tweet. This comes from Tony Khan. This week, 2 active decades-long rating streaks from 2 great legends were ended. With all due respect, until this week's head-to-head AEW on TBS versus WWE on USA, neither John Cena nor Undertaker had ever been on a WWE show with under 1 million total viewers and under 400K in the demo. Mr. Tony Khan, I would like to remind you that this was the lowest rated Edge match in absolute history that you put on. You got your ass handed to you, and you're not handling it very well. Tickets for Edge's last match, Joe sent this to me. Thank you, Joe. Tickets for Edge's last match in Toronto, 14,292 tickets. Tickets for Independence Dynamite, 3,621. Talk about a fucking drop-off, Tony Khan. Oh, also, SmackDown, Edge's last match, a quarter hour, 2.1 million. And then he had about 600,000 people watching his match this week, maybe even less. I think that you got your ass kicked and you need to just deal with it, dude. You got to move on. You went over there expecting to fight their JV team, and some varsity guys showed up, and now you're talking shit. Go ahead.
One, you can't compare ratings for broadcast TV to cable, because I'll tell you what, when SmackDown moves to the Fox network, they ain't going to be getting 2 million viewers.
I'm just speaking. It might, more people are going to be watching on SmackDown. I don't know what the data was for his last Raw match, if that's what you want to talk about, but I'm sure it was higher than 500,000. Right?
It's just cherry picking of statistics. Now, did Tony Khan act like a complete boner and all of this?
Yes,
absolutely,
yes,
dude. Someone's got to take, like, I know Jimmy Jacobs is sitting there next to him on his plane. He's got to like do some of that, voodoo magic that we had from the undead realm and take his phone from him.
Yeah, interesting strategy too, and I kind of understand the strategy. It's kind of like dirty poker in a sense, in that he has so many followers, and he gets more virality on stuff than your normal rando. And so when regular Twitter user who's not really connected to wrestling goes into his For You, which is where I see all of Mike Gilbert's tweets.
Me too, for some reason. I always get him in the For You too. I don't know what's up with that.
You're just going to see a bunch of Tony Khan tweets related to wrestling, right? You're not going to see a Shawn Michaels tweet, or you're not going to see, maybe you'll see a Cody Rhodes tweet or something. But like, Tony is trying to game Twitter so that his tweets stand over all of these other tweets. And he's also trying to dunk on people, but yeah, I mean, Twitter is
that was a pretty poor dunk. Those guys didn't even wrestle; they were just like on the outside.
Well, I mean,
they were the draws of the they were.
They definitely helped out the show. Yeah.
His poor judgment started when he called Shawn Michaels and Triple H bald assholes. Like that was kind of uncalled for.
See, that was poor judgment, unbecoming of a professional. I happen to be entertained by that stuff.
I thought it was hilarious.
Who he reminds me of, Garrett? Right now, he a little bit of Micah Parsons talking all that shit heading into Sunday. Micah Parsons, the defensive end for the Cowboys, and then they got their asses whooped 42-10, and then afterwards he's like, "Oh no, we can get them again. Yeah. Come on, guys, you're not really all that good." That's kind of
laugh now, cry later is what he said.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Laugh now, cry later.
I just wish Tony was funnier. Right. I think if you're gonna be that, if that's gonna be your Twitter identity, like I just would like he can talk shit, but it's very rarely like laugh out loud hilarious. Like I just wish he was funnier with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs a Chael Sonnen like person who has no credibility, and you don't really care if he tweets. He's just going to be a jerk, but he's very popular because he's a jerk, and that's how you can game the Twitter algorithm. I'd rather have a Chael Sonnen like type do that, the pro AEW stuff, rather than the guy who's running the company. I would just rather not see him on Twitter that much. But he is their top interview. Like when it comes to promoting and when it comes to getting information, like getting all the viral stuff and all the blogs going, he's the best person at it, right? Like he trusts himself to do that. He doesn't seem like he trusts most other people to do that.
Yeah. He is definitely their number one fan, their number one promoter. He owns the company. He books the company. He is the president, GM. He has everything to that company. He needs to just, talk some shit going in, but after you get the L, just like take that one on the chin. All right, guys, you got me on this time. We're going to do this again next baseball season. I'm coming at you even harder.
Yeah.
Like that would have been a better response.
Absolutely.
But hey, guys, we are out of time. I think we ran about 20 minutes over time. Garrett, why don't you go ahead and plug your show, plug your network, patreon.com/FightGameMedia. You got tons of content over there. So tell us all about it.
That's all. If you want to follow Fight Game Media on Twitter, just at Fight Game Media, you can see all the things that we do. Fun thing for tomorrow is, we have this secondary tier, the $10 tier, and we're getting our first happy hour going on with those folks. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I like, at least virtually, pressing the flesh and really meeting people in person and getting to know them. Like that's kind of what I really enjoy about this thing. So much like I got to do that with you guys. But so that's all. Yeah. Just at Fight Game Media on Twitter. Come check us out.
All right, and then Garrett, I'm sure we'll be back tomorrow with Uncle Dave on Wrestling Observer Radio. And
absolutely,
we're live, pal. He's got all kinds of stuff going on there.
Thank him for following me. Thank you for following me on Twitter.
You know what? You know what? I don't know what the hell I got to do to get this fucking guy to follow me.
Well, you need to come to his house, like you said. Yeah. You possibly will in the future. You need to come hang out, spend some time with Uncle Dave, and then maybe
me and him tanked Baron Corbin's career together. You would think that we would have a bond.
Just before we get out, you guys are going to come do something with me sometime soon as well. Yes. And that'll be a lot of fun. And I think I'm supposed to not like you guys or something because you guys.
I think there was like a whole thing where people thought that we got pilfered by Voices. Like there was a raid. It was like Todd Gordon on the phone the ECW days trying to get us.
No, I love you guys. I love what you do. I wish you the most success humanly possible for your show. That's how much I.
Thank you for being here, and I always appreciate you getting us started, boss. We really loved having you. And for everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening in. If you could do me a big favor and hit that like button, make sure you throw down a comment, and also be a subscriber to the Voices of Wrestling YouTube. I'd greatly appreciate it. And then also head over to patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show, where we're gonna have some overtime coming up, and I'll also be back with some Brace for Impact this weekend. And until next time. Mahalo.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Mate, no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Mate, no rain from the track when